The story of this film emerges from a dark reality, a terrifying and horrifying reality born from the flames right in the heart of Britain. The film tells the tale of families being separated from their children when the government decides to evacuate them from the city for their protection. The story revolves around George's separation from Rita.
Recap camp.
One night, while George is playing with his mother, Rita, it seems they are having a great time and everything is fine. But it isn't long before the air raid siren sound can be heard. Rita immediately picks George up and calls for his father to take them to the shelter. The police and officials block people's entry to a subway station, but soon the sound of bombs changes their minds. They quickly open the doors. George and his mother, along with his grandfather, enter the station and spend the night there. The next morning, Rita is busy gathering George's things. It doesn't seem like George is happy about this situation. He tells her that he prefers to stay with her rather than be forced to go somewhere else. But his mother insists, and this is something that cannot be changed. Downstairs, the grandfather's waiting to see George off for a long time. He promises George that they will see each other again and that everything will return to normal, reminding him that now that he is alone, he shouldn't be afraid of bullies. George says goodbye and goes to the train station with his mother. However, it seems that George is much angrier than he shows. In the middle of the train station, he escapes from his mother's grasp, and when she finds him in one of the carriages, George doesn't even look at her. Rita tries to talk to George, but the train starts moving. She keeps begging George to at least say goodbye, but he leaves for his new city without saying a word. Rita can't stop thinking about that moment. On the train, George meets Katie, and of course some bullies his age. When they mock George because of his skin color, he gets angry and starts yelling at them. Just as his grandfather said, bullies only talk and can't do anything. George remembers the good times in his neighborhood, when he used to play with his friends in the street and felt happy at home with his family, and it seems he doesn't intend to stay there. He picks up his suitcase and heads towards the train door. He easily opens it from the outside. First, he throws his suitcase out. After a moment of thinking, it's his turn. George walks back along the same railway he came from. On the way, a train is heading back to the city. He hides, so they won't find him. Then, he immediately runs towards the last carriage to get on. Finally, after a lot of effort, he succeeds. But, apparently, he is not the only passenger on this train. There are 3 brothers. Their names are Tom, Archie, and Ian. They know that if the police find them, they will put them back on their train and take them out of the city. So they decide to stick together. George shares the sandwich his mother made with everyone. After a few hours, when they arrive in the city, the train officers start checking each carriage one by one. Tom immediately notices and wakes up the others. As soon as the door opens, all 4 of them start running as fast as they can to escape from the police. A train enters the track, and George is scared to cross the rails, so he stops right there. Tom tells him to hurry up while he stands there. They don't realize that another train is about to pass on the track where Tom is standing, and then it's too late. George is shocked at seeing this scene. The station alarm goes off, and in the chaos, George manages to escape and reaches a bus. On the other side, Rita is still mourning the loss of George. She remembers the memories with her husband, who is also George's father. They had an amazing night together at the club and were having a great time. But then a few white people start a fight, and the police arrive just as her husband is defending himself, and they arrest him. This is how Rita loses him forever. George asks the bus ticket officer about the route to his home. The woman answers him, but it's a long way. At night, while George is looking at shop windows, an officer finds him. His name is Afe. The man is very kind and friendly. He takes George to the police station and promises to take him home the next morning. Afe takes George with him on a patrol, and they walk through the streets. Later, Afe takes him to a shelter, and they agree that Afe will return in the morning to take him home. The next morning, George plays hide and seek with some other kids. He accidentally overhears an officer saying that Afe was killed during an air raid while on patrol the night before. That same morning, Rita hears that her son has not reached his destination, and other kids have seen him jump off the train. Rita becomes frantic, and when she sees that those responsible for her son are behaving very calmly, she decides to go find him herself. George, who hasn't eaten anything for a day, can't take his eyes off the pastries in a bakery, but the owner angrily shoos him away from in front of his shop. A young woman, who sees this scene, comes out of the store and gives George some pastries. She suggests they go somewhere to get him some food, and then he can go wherever he likes. They enter an old gambling house. George looks a bit scared, and there's no sign of the promise made to him by the young woman. The man in charge there doesn't treat him well. George seems completely confused and appears to have gotten into serious trouble. They all head towards a dilapidated house, but it's still unclear why they need George and what is inside this ruined house. George tries to escape from them, but they easily catch him and threaten him that if he does it again, he will be punished. Inside the house, George passes through a very narrow hallway and reaches a hole he must crawl through. The hole is so small that only a child can fit through it. And when he enters, he realizes that this is a jewelry store. George has stumbled into a robbery. He grabs a few pieces of jewelry and puts them in a bag, but just then the police arrive. George hides before the police can enter. They find the hole and temporarily seal it. However, one of the officers realizes that some of the jewels are missing. George is terrified and knows he could be found at any moment. As the police get a bit closer, George hits a wooden beam in the house hard to scare them into thinking the building is collapsing, and he successfully manages to make them flee. Then it's time to divide the jewels. George tells them he wants to go home, but one of the men punches him hard in the face and then starts hitting himself in the face. George seemingly has no way to escape this madman. Rita, along with one of her friends who is in the army, is searching for George the entire time, but wherever they go, they hit a dead end. Apparently, no one knows where George is or what he is doing, except for George himself, who knows he is in a terrible predicament. They go to a dance party, and they are collecting the jewelry from all the people there. They are busy playing with the dead bodies. When George sees that no one is paying attention to him, he quickly climbs up the stairs and manages to get himself into an alley where he can hide. The German bombings start again, this time much more intensely than before. Seeing that his hiding spot is not safe at all, George quickly leaves. But the rain of German bombs is falling everywhere. A German plane crashes into a building right next to him, and by some luck, he escapes unharmed. The whole city is on fire, and George struggles to reach a subway station. All the hallways, train platforms, and even the train tracks are crowded with people, and there's nowhere for anyone to go. George spends the night there. But the next morning, a sound comes from the end of the tunnel. Everyone wakes up to this noise, and George sees a little water on the tracks. But there shouldn't be any water in the subway. A few seconds later, water rushes into the station with terrifying force. Everyone panics and tries to save themselves. The water rises rapidly and pulls many people into the tunnels. George must reach an exit before the water covers everything. He gets off the tracks and heads towards an exit, just as another wave crashes into the station. George gathers himself again and heads towards another exit. The power in the station goes out, and everyone tries to reach the main door of the station, but it has been locked since last night. George's body is smaller than everyone else's. He goes under the water to pass through a small hole to go get help, but he gets stuck. People try to save George, and the next morning, the little hero of the city wakes up in a warm bed in someone's house. The woman tells him that he helped save many people last night. She goes to prepare breakfast for him and then take him home. When George hears the doorbell, he quietly peeks through his room door to see downstairs. The police have come to take George away again. George quickly puts on his clothes and escapes through the back window. When he gets into the street, He realizes that he is very close to home and runs as fast as he can to get there quickly. He crosses the main street and reaches the alleys of his neighborhood just as he arrives in front of their house. Their house has been destroyed by air bombardment the night before. Rescue workers find his grandfather's cat, but when George finds his grandfather, he is dead. When leaving his home, George never thought it would be the last time he would see his grandfather alive.
George?
However, he finally manages to find his mother. Rita is shocked and embraces her son. George and Rita finally succeed in finding each other. Even war could not prevent this mother and child from reuniting. If you liked the video, you know what to do.